Hello everyone, this is Matthew Curley, and in this video, Eileen Hahn and I intend to delve into the topic of Japanese literature within what is considered to be the classical era of Japan. With this, we are intending to focus in this presentation within the Edo and the Meiji periods of Japanese history. This is because they precede what is now considered to be the modern era within Japan. However, they do not stretch too far back into what is considered to be the early traditional period within Japanese history. So to begin, we will start with an overview of the Edo period, which lasted from 1603 to 1868. Without this delving into too much of a history lesson, there are some general facts regarding the Edo period that I think are essential in understanding the context of literature within this period. First, this is considered to be the last period within traditional Japan, and even more important to that, this was a period of prolonged internal peace. This is very important as prior to this era, there were many internal conflicts within Japan, including civil wars, civil strifes, and regional wars between different daimyo, which are basically Japanese territorial warlords. During the Edo period, however, Japan was unified under the Tokugawa shogunate. And this is important as because of this unification, you had a prolonged era of peace, which allowed for a resurgence in cultural values within Japan, within Kyoto and Osaka. Now, these two cities remained very important during the early Edo period. However, later into the Edo period, the city of Edo, which is now modern-day Tokyo, became the center of Japanese culture. Two more important things to note during this period is that throughout most of the period, 1603 to the 1860s, Japan was mostly isolated, or at least free from Western influence, other than Dutch influence in the south of Japan, which was mostly restricted to trade. Second, printing was widely adopted during this era, which led to a resurgence in popular literature. One quick note regarding printing that I found very interesting was that Japan had the capacity to print things from around the mid 700s, around mid 760, actually, 760s. However, this capacity was mostly restricted to Buddhist writings. This is important as prior to the 1600s, most pieces of Japanese literature were in written manuscript form, and they were not widely reproduced, meaning that they are rather rare to find and thus rare to study. However, there have been some pieces of Japanese literature found prior to the 1600s, including a lot of poetry. But not to digress, literature during the Edo period, you saw a major resurgence of poetry due to the peaceful nature of the time. And poetry was shared not just among the aristocratic courtly class, but was also within like the lower classes, the feudal classes. And one of the major court poets during the time was Kagawa Kagaki, who was the founder of the Kaian School of Poetry. And this school of poetry mostly emphasized the tone of poetry over the poetry's actual intellectual content. This is important as this school of poetry was very prominent in Japan up until around the mid 1800s. One more major resurgence in the early Edo period that we saw was the resurgence of Renga as a popular pastime. Renga poetry is the development of poetry between two or more poets who are each composing about 5 verse-long pieces of poetry, which they then combine into one complete piece. This was very popular not just within the courtly class, but also within the feudal classes as a pastime more than anything else. And some of these pieces of poetry would even be comical, in fact, especially within the lower classes, as they were a way to kind of vent after a long day. Um, and through the prominence of Renga, you developed haiku within the mid to late Edo period. Within Renga, you typically have the first few verses outlining the different um, pieces of setting within the poetry. So the landscape, the time of day, um, anything that would detail the setting. And from this, you developed your own form of poetry, which is the haiku. Now, in the mid to late Edo period, you began to see a resurgence of Zen philosophy as well. And one major poet during this period, Maeshiro Busho, pictured on the right, uh, took the Zen influence within his own daily life and put that into his poetry, which um, basically made him, in all accounts, the father of the modern day haiku, as he combined this Zen and Buddhist influence into the haiku. An example of this, which is on the screen right now, is on a withered branch, a crow has alighted, nightfall in autumn. Now, this is very different as in the early parts of the Edo period, haikus were mostly used just for any type of poetry. It could even be used for gossip. However, through Mashiro Busho, haiku was then used as a form of expressing uh, philosophy and expressing different ideas regarding the universe and life as a whole. Um, and then from there, you began to get into the Meiji period of literature.